There we go.
Also do a test. Yeah.
Do you think the LGBTQ community is represented well in media as a whole?
Generally, yes. I think it's better than it was. There's a lot more realistic and more balanced representations on television now. I think in the past, films have tried to explore LGBTQ characters in kind of some extent, but they're always minority characters. I think nowadays you get a far more balanced way. In mainstream films, you get two good representations on mainstream films. Previously, I think a lot of characterizations and representations were on things like independent or art cinema, something like Derek Jarman or Andy Warhol films. And that was how you got previous representation. I think nowadays you get a lot more mainstream, kind of forefronted representation of LGBTQ characters.
You said about you got more mainstream ones now. Can you think of an example where they are represented in like a more mainstream like film or TV show?
Yeah, sure. If you look at presenters, I mean presenters on TV, you've got people like Claire Bowling. I think Jane Hill. I think she's a newscaster. I think as far as I know. Sue Perkins, who's on the kind of cooking programme thing. And then you've the characters like Graham Norton, Alan Carr, Simon Amstell as well. Films. The earliest film representation I can think of a gay character, and I'm sure there are ones before that, was a film with Dirk Bogarde called Victim. It was about 1960 something as far as I know. Then in the 80s you had things like My Beautiful Laundrette. Nowadays you've got things like Dallas Buyers Club, which I think is a lot more positive representation. It's more forefronted representations, in Philadelphia, examples like that which are mainstream. Lesbian representations, there aren't many. I think try Googling it. There really aren't that many. First one I remember is Desert Heart. Again, there will be ones kind of old cinema. I think there's one called Pandora's Box from way, way, way back. But the earliest one I remember is Desert Heart. Then you've got minor representations in things like Black Swan. TV would be things like Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, as far as I remember from quite a long time, where there's Fingersmith and Tipping the Velvet. And then when you get bisexuality, I think the only representations I can actually think of is films such as Shame, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and the only other one I can think of is a brand new one called Love with Gaspar Noé film, a French director. Those are the only ones I can actually think of. Transsexual and transgender, then you've got TV. I think there was a guy in The Voice recently. I think if it may have been The Voice. And the other one was things like The Birdcage. Those are the main mainstream ones I can think of. But there's an awful lot of minority and independent films as well, I think.
What do you think could be done to improve the representation of all different sexualities in like mainstream media?
To improve them? I think that's a difficult question. I think probably they can be improved through things like, rather than just tokenism and having people just ticking a box to fit in a character that they may think needs representing, I think actually focusing them as the main point of representation in a film or a television program or a book or a radio program or magazine or whatever you want to do, rather than just kind of ticking a box with it. I think it's a case of ignoring the ticking the boxing and actually featuring characters in their own right, featuring people in their own right as people, rather than just a kind of minority. I think that would be the way to go forward, and that's how I'd improve things, is kind of not ticking a box exercise, but featuring people because they're interesting or their characters are interesting.
What sexuality in the LGBTQ group do you think is represented the most in media?
I'd say probably again, and you can prove it by Googling it, it's probably gay men. I think gay men are represented far more in any forms of media than any other kind of group. Google it. If you look, you'll find that out. Also, that might be due to a historical thing. You may be going back to traditions of TV, traditions of films where gay men have been represented more throughout the years than any other group. More kind of accepting of something like that, or they're more kind of familiar with it. So maybe the future will be things will even out if there are more and more representations of other people. But I think gay men are the most represented group, I think.
And as an opposite to the last question, which sexuality do you think is represented the least?
If you look in Hollywood films, again, by just looking and finding out the kind of stats, I think you'll find that lesbians are least represented, apart from maybe bisexuality. And I think that is something that really isn't represented particularly at all. The only examples I could think of is the ones I gave earlier on, which would be things like Shame, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Love. There doesn't seem to be much representation on either TV or on film or on anything else that I've come across of something like that. So I think that's maybe the least represented group. I've no idea why.
What form of media do you think represents these different sexualities the best?
I don't think there's a preferable form of media at all. I think it depends what you want to do. They've all got the pros and cons. If you look at TV, you've got the largest audience, so you can reach the most people at the same time. If you look at film, you can explore things in more depth. So I really don't think there is a preferential one. I think it just depends what you actually want to do, what you want to get across. If it's a detailed story, film has a more captive audience. Although you could have a serial or a documentary on TV, so I really don't know which is the best one. It just depends what you want to represent.
And I'm going to use one from the Vox Pops we did to serve as kind of still related, but it's a bit of an off-topic one. Do you think that people should be labelled as like the different sexualities, like the different sexualities have the flags and things like that?
No, I don't think it matters. I think personally you should take people as people, whoever they are. It doesn't make any difference whether they've got a label on them or not. Some people might want to be labelled, but other people might not want to be labelled. So I just think accepting people as people is the best way forward. I think it'll take a lot of doing to get people to do that. But I don't think labelling someone particularly does anything. I don't think it makes really much difference.
Is that it then?
Yep.
Yeah.